Welcome to the webinar series on assessment in the Equals program. There are 4 parts to this series. My name is Christy McDonald and I am an instructor with Bridges. Bridges provides professional development for teachers of students with significant disabilities. I'm really excited to be working with the Alberta team again this year. A little bit about my own background. I was a regular classroom teacher for 12 years in the elementary panel, where I worked with students of a variety of abilities, and some of whom had special education needs within my classroom. For 5 years, I worked directly with special education students, sometimes in a self-contained area, sometimes supporting them in a regular class setting. An area I really struggled with when it came to supporting my students was math. I think it was such a struggle because I didn't have a curriculum per se to follow, one that provided a systematic way of delivering math. Rather, I was picking and choosing from a number of resources, adapting them, modifying them, and just trying to make them work. But I know I was missing a lot. How I would have loved to have had the Equals Math program, and specifically how I would have appreciated the Equals Assessment tool. In this webinar, we're going to focus on 3 aspects of the Equals assessment. We're going to talk about why it's important that you do an individualized assessment for each of your students. We're going to look at how you will then use the information from these assessments. And then we'll also discuss briefly the other types of assessment that will take place on an ongoing basis throughout Equals. So why is it important that we take the time to do these individualized assessments? If you've had a chance to look at the Equals kit and to peek through the Equals assessment, you may have the sense that this is going to take a lot of time. And in some cases, teachers feel somewhat overwhelmed by this idea. And it does take a lot of time. There's no doubt about that. That's because the Equals assessment allows you to get a very clear picture of your students' math knowledge. The assessment tool will actually allow your students to show you what they know about math. Previously, you have likely been guessing to some degree about your students' math knowledge because your students struggle to communicate their knowledge, or we as teachers struggle to find a way for them to demonstrate it in a meaningful way. The Equals assessment tool allows you to do that. And then from this knowledge that you'll gain, you'll also determine the gaps that they may have in their math knowledge. We do individualized assessments to challenge the previous assumptions we may have about our students and math. I mentioned that sometimes as special education teachers and classroom teachers, we struggle to determine what these students actually know about math. And so often we operate under assumptions. We assume they know a concept because they've been exposed to it for many years, but in fact maybe they haven't mastered that concept. The opposite is also true. We assume because they can't communicate their learning in a way that is typical that they haven't gleaned the knowledge that they may in fact have. So this tool will really reveal that to you. Another really important reason we do these individualized assessments is to inform our own teaching. It will help us to make decisions about where we begin in the Equals program, and if we need to review certain concepts or spend a little more time in one area. So it will be a really valuable tool for informing your own teaching. And a very practical reason to do the individualized assessments is to determine the starting point for the program. Where exactly should you begin with each student? We'll talk more about that later. Here's what some of your colleagues had to say about the Equals assessment tool. Equals had me questioning many of my assumptions of what individual students knew and did not know. Sometimes it is easy to forget that the students we work with have very fragmented skills. This program has helped me find and target those missing skills. Another teacher said, although the assessment was long, the information gathered gave me the best understanding of where the students were at. Doing the assessment to inform teaching was a lot of work, but as I had more practice with the assessment, I was able to assess faster. And finally, another teacher said, Equals assessment gave me greater insight into the specific areas that were lacking in the students' numeracy knowledge, thus enabling me to fill in the gaps during the year. The overwhelming response from the teachers who did do individualized assessments was that it was time well spent. They felt they had a better understanding of their students and their students' math knowledge than they had ever had in the past. So once we've completed the assessment, how will we use this information? Well, one very important way to use it is to be able to provide clear communication with parents about their child's current math knowledge. Probably never before will these parents have had such a clear picture of their students' math knowledge. Earlier I mentioned that the information that you get from this assessment will help provide you with a starting point for the Equals Math program. You can use this information to update your students' IEPs, and if you decide to do an assessment at the end of the year, it will provide a starting point for next year and possibly the next year's teacher. Now, like any good math program, you will not be relying on one tool to assess your students. You would be using a varied approach and all of the different assessment methods that you would use on an ongoing basis. Some examples are here. In every lesson in Equals, there is a section called Number Notes where students communicate in a variety of ways what they learned in math that day. Math portfolios and math journals can be created from the activities that the students do on an ongoing basis, and these portfolios and journals can provide a strong basis for assessment. Other types of ongoing assessment may include video of the problem-solving portion of the lesson. Every lesson contains a problem-solving activity, and a video that captures the students working through this process is really valuable assessment information. Likewise, workstations are contained within every lesson, and capturing the students working and thinking through these workstations can provide important evidence of learning. Photographs of the things that students have done or engaged in a certain activity also can form the basis of really rich assessment, and then artifacts of the student's work. So while the assessment tool in the Equals program plays a vital role in our teaching, our planning, and our reporting, the other ongoing assessment tools and methods that you use throughout your program will ensure rich and varied assessment of learning and for learning. When you're ready, you can move on to the Equals Assessment webinar Part 2.